Good morning. How you guys doing? It's me again, your financial guy, Roy Imorotu. So this morning I just want to talk about the current rebasing of the GDP and how is affecting the country. Also the inflation rate. They've done a new calculation and how the inflation rate has dropped and then its effects on the economy nationally. Most of you should know the meaning of GDP by now, but if you still don't know the meaning of GDP means gross domestic product. That is the total number of goods and services that is produced in the country within a year. Our Bureau of Statistics, they did a rebasing of the GDP recently from 2010 to 2019, and we saw that the GDP grew significantly from 180 something or trillion to about 300 or something trillion naira. So I just want to talk about some of the factors that led to this rebasing. We are not solving any mass, it's just listing some of the things that they added, like some other industry, some other sectors were added to their calculation, like the agricultural sector, the technology sector. So we have some new companies springing up, like in the financial sector. We have some fintech that are coming up. So these are added to the rebasing of the GDP. So some of the new companies that are coming up, they added what they are bringing into the country. So these are some of the things that made the GDP numbers increased significantly. And then our major driver, the major driver of our economy is the crude oil production, exportation. Even though crude oil is the major driver of the economy, they have to account for the contribution of the other smaller sector and what they are bringing into the economy, like our financial techs, our technology companies, agriculture, even the services, goods and services, our retail stores and the rest. So they did the calculation, and this is what made the GDP to increase. So we are not going into any deep statistic or any of that. That's that. And then for our inflation, we know inflation, the rise of increase in price of goods and services. Why is it that every year our money, the purchasing power of our money is always reducing? That is to say, if I have 100 naira this year, what I can buy with this 100 naira, the amount of things I can buy with this 100 naira will reduce by next year. So that means our currency is actually losing value every year. That's the power, their purchasing power. So that's just inflation in general, the rise in the price of goods and services. So in 2024, our inflation rate went up drastically. 2023, 2024. So this year the thing has reduced because it also did a rebasing for the inflation, and that one is taken from 2024. They did the calculation from 2024 up to 2025. We now see that our inflation rate has reduced from 34 point something to 34% in 2024. It has reduced to about 27% in early 2025, and it has even reduced further as at last month, or was it last month or the month before last month. It has reduced to 22.7%. Now that is for the core inflation. It is 22.7%. That inflation, food and energy is excluded from it. So if you add food, the inflation of food and energy to that particular percentage, the thing will rise to 27 point something percent. That is to say that the cost of food in Nigeria is still fairly high. So our GDP numbers have increased, our inflation numbers have reduced, and our economy is benefiting from this reduction and this increase of GDP. and so we are enjoying the benefits. Our debt ratio has actually reduced also, so it's a plus for Nigeria. It's a plus for Nigeria. So now that we've talked about the GDP and the inflation, let's talk about its effect in the economy. So its effect is positive, but some economists have come out to say that the calculation they did, especially for the inflation rate, that the calculation is wrong, and that the inflation numbers that they are telling us is actually higher than they are. So according to some of them, they said that some sectors were combined, which is not supposed to be so, and that is what made the percentage of the inflation to reduced. So I don't know if that's just rumor, or there's no way I can validate that for now, but that's what people are saying. And then for our GDP, is actually a positive news for the country in general. The impact of the GDP is being felt internationally, because it will reflect how investors will value our country, and then it will also affect foreign exchange. So the ripples of this our GDP is being felt abroad, internationally, but it has not really affected Nigeria, the broader Nigeria. That is to say that the poorer Nigeria, those that can barely afford these basic amenities, they've not really felt it. To them, things are still, the price of goods and services is still high. So you see, this inflation rate is not really, the thing has not really spread, even though the numbers have reduced. The impact, we are not really feeling the impact for now. So let's see. Hopefully, if it continues to reduce, we'll begin to feel it locally, and that will in turn continue to boost the economy. So now let's talk about the main driver of our economy, which is our crude oil production and exportation. We used to have 3 refineries in Nigeria. We have one in Kaduna, we have one in Port Harcourt, and then we have one in Warri, Delta State. But now we have 4 refineries. Dangote has built one. So we have the Dangote refinery, we have the one in Port Harcourt, in Eleme, and then we have the one in Warri. I regret to inform you that 3 of these refineries are actually not working. It's quite a shame actually for a country like Nigeria to have 3 refineries that are not functioning. It's quite a shame. And do you know that they are spending millions of naira in each of these refineries on a yearly basis, and they are not still doing anything? But that's a matter for another time. We'll discuss that one later. So the 3 refineries are not working. The only functioning refinery in Nigeria right now is the Dangote refinery. And do you know that even this Dangote refinery that is functioning, there are certain persons or group, or should I say faction, that are fighting it locally here in Nigeria and even abroad. But let's not go into that now. Before we discuss about Dangote's refinery properly, let's talk about the whole process that go into the crude oil drilling and then exportation. So let's talk about OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. That's OPEC. It's made up of crude oil producing countries, and Nigeria is a member of it. So they are the ones that are regulating the price, the production, the exportation of crude oils. We have other people that are not members of OPEC, but they still work with OPEC. like Russia, Kazakhstan, and some other countries. Now, according to OPEC, each country must produce a minimum of 1.5 million barrels per day. That is 1.5 million barrels of crude oil per day. That is the law according to OPEC. And Nigeria have been producing roughly 1.4, 1.3. So most times Nigeria is not meeting the OPEC quota. Though in crude oil drilling, Nigeria drills 1.3 million barrels per day, and then they drill I think 0.4 or 0.5 condensates. So when they are drilling the crude oil, they drill what is also called condensate. Now, after drilling this crude oil, use 1.3 million barrels of crude oil every day. What do we do with them? Our refineries are not functioning. So what do? The majority of this crude oil will now be exported to other countries to be refined by them, and then they will not sell it back to us. I actually blame the federal government and the NNPC or NNPCL. I actually blame them for some of these things that is going on in our crude oil and petroleum, our oil and gas sector. Because if you look at it, some of the laws, I'm talking of the Senate now, some of the laws that they've made, some of the laws governing the oil and gas sector needs to be updated. Needs to be updated in order to benefit Nigeria and Nigerians. But you see, they are still following some of these old bills and laws that are kind of that needs to be changed. That one is one. Then I blame the NNPC for poor decision making, and some of the things they are doing is, to me, is actually fraudulent. Because NNPC is basically doing the job of OPEC on the national scale. So they are the ones that are they are the ones that are setting some of all these laws, and the ones that are regulating some of all these production and the rest. And one thing that always baffles me is that NNPC, sometimes I thought that NNPC was a government agency, but I'm now discovering that they have their own autonomy. They are running as a private company, and they are saying they even want to become a publicly traded company by 2026 or so. And then you see again that they are like government agencies. So I don't even know how they are functioning. So I don't know if they are just working with the government, or the thing is actually confusing. And one of the reasons I blame them is for taking these refineries. Dangote bought some of the refineries in Nigeria years ago. These 3 refineries. I don't know if he bought 3 of them, but I know he bought 1 or 2 some years back, and then the government later took it back. You can see that Nigeria government has a track record of not governing well. Their government has not been, they've not been doing well from years back. And if government is operating a refinery and they are not doing a good job in operating that refinery, they should sell it off to private citizens that can do well, that can do the job better. And so Dangote bought this refinery some years back, and the government later took it back. Why? If they were not going to do a good job repairing and making it to be functional, then why did they take it back? And then I noticed again that some of the money that is coming into our country, some of our budget, they are making budgets for these refineries that are not functioning. They are budgeting millions of naira for their repairs. But you can see that this money that is going into the repair of this refinery is not yielding anything. It's just as if, and that is why I said some of the things they are doing look fraudulent, because how can you be spending millions of naira on refineries year in year out, and then these refineries, they are not working, and then you are still putting money into that thing? It's not wise. It does not make any sense. So you can see why some of the things that they are doing is just is somehow. And the government need to look into this, and then let them, if it's to sell it off, let them sell this refinery off, because they are becoming a liability to the country as a whole. They are bleeding our country. Money that should be used for something worthwhile, something better. Invest in education or invest in other stuff that will make the country prosperous. They are spending it on the refineries that is not working, and that is one. And then you remember I said there are factors, or there are groups that are actively working against Dangote. Now, one thing people are saying is that Dangote has monopolized the industry in Nigeria, and then it's difficult for other companies to come and compete. Is that really true? That's not true. Dangote didn't monopolize any industry. If you look at the cement industry, it's not only Dangote cement that is in Nigeria. We have Boa Cement, we have Lafarge. So we have other companies that are actually in competition with Dangote. So I won't agree that Dangote is monopolizing anything. And the government is giving out license to other individuals that if they want to go into building of a refinery, the license is there. Government gives out the license. But you see that these people, they are not actually building. If you have the money to build, government say fine, take license and go and build. But you see that many of them are not building. Some of all these players, they are importing refined petroleum into the country, and then because they are refining this petroleum into the country, they are actually crashing their own they actually see Dangote refinery as a threat, because they are importing this petroleum, and some of them, they are importing substandard petroleum into the country at a cheaper cost, and this petroleum, they are not actually good. So you see, they are making things to be difficult for Dangote. Some of them are even petitioning the government to make things difficult for Dangote refinery. So these are some of the things that should be checked. And then another thing again that I discovered while I was doing my research was that we have one of the best crude in Nigeria. So our own crude oil is very superior compared to other countries that are producing crude oil. So these things we should leverage on these things to actually put a premium in our crude oil while we are exporting, to make more revenue. You see, now how do you know that? How do I know rather that our crude oil is superior? Now, what makes crude oil to be superior is two things. One of them is their weight, the weight of the crude when compared to water. If the crude oil is light, that means it's a very good crude oil, because it will be easy to produce petroleum from it. It will be easy to distillate. And then another thing that makes a crude oil to be good is the content of sulfur in the crude oil. Now, if a crude oil has a high content of sulfur content inside, it is not a very good crude oil. But if the content of sulfur is low, that means the crude oil is a very good crude. Low content crude oil are rare, and we as a country, Nigeria, we have one of the crude oil that has the amount of sulfur in our crude oil is very, very, very low. So we have one of the best crude, and then we should be using this to our advantage. So you see the process is not really economical for us, because we have this crude, we produce this crude, and then we export it out to other countries. They refine it there, and then they sell it back to us at premium prices. And then this is why most times the price of PMS in Nigeria is often high. And then recent years, 2023 or so, Tinubu removed fuel subsidy, and this made the price of PMS to even increase more. So you see these things that is going on, it's not actually it's not good. Now let's talk about Dangote Refinery. Now Dangote has finally built the refinery, and it's our expectation that the bulk of the crude that we produce in Nigeria will be sold to Dangote Refinery to be refined in Nigeria and then sold to us at a cheaper rate. But it's not really happening like that. It's not going as was planned. Dangote Refinery has the capacity to produce 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day. That is roughly half of the crude oil that is produced per day by Nigeria. So you would think that they will sell this crude oil, at least half of the crude oil that is produced per day will be sold to Dangote, and then maybe export the other half. But you will see that this is not what is going on. Though the data, it is not public knowledge. We don't know how much crude oil is being sold to Dangote on a daily basis, but we can guess that it's not up to that amount, because if it were up to that amount, Dangote will not be seeking to buy crude oil from other countries. Recently, Dangote bought crude oil from the United States. Crude oil worth millions of naira from the United States. Now, many people are blaming Dangote, but I won't blame Dangote, because Dangote is a businessman. He has shareholders that he's accountable to. So his drive is to make profit, even though he wants to help the Nigeria economy, but his main drive is to make profit for himself and his investors and shareholders.